Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cinema A to B, because Ben and I just want to talk movies and force you to watch them, like strap you down and just make you listen to 30 minutes of our melodious voices. Just
melodious.
Melodious. No, I'm kidding. So this week we are going to be talking about a classic film from John Carpenter, 1982's The Thing. So Ben, start us off, man. Talk a little bit about it. Let me know your thoughts.
So my thought is that, my favorite John Carpenter film is Big Trouble in Little China.
Of course.
But if pressed into what I think personally is his best work, it's this. It's 1982's The Thing. And I understand folks that would say, oh, well, what about Halloween? And I think there's a really good argument for that film too. But I'm not a big horror guy. So Halloween is really well done, but it doesn't really intrigue me the way this film does. And works on a couple levels for me. It does body horror really well with visual effects that are probably only rivaled by like maybe Alien or Aliens. And then the psychological horror component is running in tandem with it, with this inability to figure out who's infected and who isn't, and the paranoia that ensues. And it's got Kurt Russell in it. So, yeah. I mean, hey, like it's just checking a lot of boxes for me. And I just watched it again. I watched it on Amazon Prime. And the reason I watched it upstairs because I wanted to see what the 4K transfer was kind of offering. And I'll be honest, outside of some stop motion stuff near the end, the movie looks like it was shot in like 1995 with the 4K transfer. Like it's so crisp. Like the image is just, the cinematographer, I think it was Cundy. It's a little bit stylistic. It kind of goes heavy with some of the blues, which was common up through the 90s to do that. It was only after like the mid 90s they started to go more naturalist with the way things were kind of lit. So, it kind of suffers from some pacing issues, I think. It really doesn't get going for like 40 minutes. And by that point, there's not much movie left. There's like maybe like an hour. So if I had to knock it would probably be that it's just not paced like a modern movie. But I still love it in a genre that I don't typically love.
So, fun fact, turns out I have never watched this movie before. I don't know what movie that I thought I watched was The Thing. I mean, it wasn't the original, like 1951, 52, like
The Thing from Another Planet.
It wasn't that. But there was some really terrible movie that I thought that I saw was The Thing. And so I'm sitting down going, oh, I'm going to have to sit through this and drag myself through it. And then like as it's going, I'm going, I've never seen this before. I don't recognize any of this. So I got to enjoy it for the first time. And I had no idea what's going on. Like
that's great.
At all. Didn't know much about it, just kind of the basics and stuff. So it was like watching it for obviously watching it the first time I did, but like watching it when it came out, like there's nothing going into it. And I got to tell you, it's really funny because one of the first things I did, I wrote on my little notes, listening to it was just like when it said like Morricone was doing the music and I'm just hearing those notes. I'm like, oh my goodness. I wrote down, this music is excellent. Like I love already the music. And so then when I started digging into the movie and like looking at some of the reviews from like 1982 where like, Siskel and Ebert gave it like panned it basically. And one of the things they said was like, the music was terrible. And I'm like, am I that off? Like I thought it was fantastic. Like I thought it was perfect. Like it was just that very, I don't know, it increased the tension and increased the paranoia. It kind of felt in some ways kind of like the Jaws soundtrack. It's very minimalistic, but yet pushed so much terror and fear and energy and evil that it just really worked. So I really like this. So Laura and I watched it. She would definitely agree with you that this is paced really slow. She got pretty bored with it pretty fast of like, oh, okay, it's still going on. We haven't really done anything. And she appreciated it, as we went on to it, but I can definitely tell this was definitely my movie. I really thoroughly enjoyed it a lot. I loved yes, it was slow. It definitely felt like an 80s or a late 70s movie, as opposed to obviously a 2024 where things took longer to build. But you're kind of building these characters, and you're building this, what's happening, while also building the tension the entire time, right? Because obviously, with knowing the name of the thing, and it's a horror film, I picked up pretty quick that the dog was the creature, right? And so you have this moment of like not knowing what was going to happen. Like, again, no idea what the creature looks like, no idea what it does. I just know at some point this dog is going to kill someone or do something, right? And so it was so tense, and so many moments of him just like the dog walking, around the base, and no one's doing anything. And I'm just going, oh, like, when is the shoe going to drop? Like, when is this going to start moving on? And so, like, I feel like, yes, it is definitely slow, but for someone watching this who doesn't know what it is, it just helped build tension the entire way. And I think we lose some of that in how fast things move along nowadays. Like, it definitely keeps our interest more, but there is a slow burning tension or paranoia that starts to kind of, fill up. So when it does actually finally happen, you're almost like relieved that we're finally getting, finally figuring out what's happening or what's going on, or like, okay, something's progressed. Okay, I can kind of, not try to worry anymore because now we can fight the monster.
That's fantastic. I love that it, I guess by happenstance that it was basically a first viewing.
Yeah, it was.
That's not something we get when we do a discussion like this. Usually, we've either both not seen it or both have, and it's just a kind of rehash. So that's excellent.
I was highly impressed. I mean, some of the creature stuff and obviously some of the stop motion stuff did not hold up super well, but like I was able to forgive a lot of that. I mean, some of it was done like excellent. A lot of the creature stuff, especially when the stomach opens up and like the jaws. Oh my goodness. Like that. I was like absolutely floored how good that looked. I was like, this is 82. My goodness. Like this looks legit, like real. Like it looks like computer generated almost, but it obviously wasn't. And my goodness, like just the attention to detail and a lot of different things. But I love how this movie did such a good job of pushing up the actual paranoia of amongst all of the lab and the scientists and stuff like that. Like honestly, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is exactly what would happen if something like this happened. Some creature came in that could imitate someone. You wouldn't know who to trust. You wouldn't know what to do. Like it would just devolve into kind of like this Lord of the Flies, situation. And it does such a great job of pushing that narrative and kind of showing this all kind of come down and what they're going to do. Now, some of the characters are pretty dumb to begin with. Like Gary, the leader with the pistol, who breaks a window in the in Antarctica of your base to shoot someone. You can't. Oh my goodness, it's super cold outside. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, you need to keep warm in there. Like,
he's too lazy to like go to the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
What I find is that the performances are all really very even. Like there's not anybody in it that jumps out at me that I feel like's turning in this really ridiculous performance. Everybody's pretty, like if they're not a really gifted actor, they're not like overplaying their hand, and then Russell's just oozes charisma. Mm-hmm. And so for him to play Mac is like perfect. And you understand after this movie why like Carpenter, like, wanted to continue to work with Russell. It's interesting. This is probably the best performance that I've seen of like the late Wilford Brimley. Mm-hmm. Like he's great. He's great. Like he figures it out so fast. Like the repercussions of this thing is so ahead of the curve with everybody with like what he wants to do. Yeah. He like jumps so many steps ahead into basically the math is saying this thing's like, what is it? A 75% chance, like one or more members had already been infected in his computer simulation. And yeah, I can forgive the really low pixelated.
Yeah. It's the 80s
graphics, but it's interesting because even though it's a period piece, like other than the computer and a couple other things and maybe the attire, the movie doesn't feel as dated because like the helicopters they fly are like still in use, that design. And then there's no cars, and you have a snowcat that's like pretty much still looks like that. So I guess the soundtrack's a little dated with some of the style, like the style of the soundtrack, but it's like you said, it's still really good. So again, I think I've hammered on this before. When you take a lot of, like, when you don't have cars from 82 in your movie and some other things, you start to kind of forget that the era that it's set in, especially a film like this, where you get invested probably about halfway through. You're just in it. You're just, who's infected, who's not, what are they going to even get out of this? Most of them is just running around with a freaking torch, roasting everything.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was I'd forgotten how big a mistake it was that they brought the big, like, mutated thing back. Had they not done that, the only thing in camp was the dog. And because that thing infected
Norris.
At least one person.
Yeah, we don't know for certain, but
and it could have been, it infected it's one of the creepiest scenes in the whole movie is when it's Bennings. When Bennings is like halfway through mutation.
Yeah.
Because Bennings is the one that got infected by that thing. Like the blood was still active and it oozed down and then came after him. I thought Bennings got infected when I thought the dog bit him because the dog was messing with him and he had that leg wound from getting shot. And he tells that guy, "Hey, get that dog out of here." And then, the guy puts the dog in the cage and you have that amazing sequence where
it takes over.
But yeah, it's pretty intriguing to like try to figure out when Norris gets infected and then when Palmer, like, when does that happen? Because you get that silhouette, which I'd read later that Carpenter made that silhouette like kind of mysterious as to like, it doesn't really look like anybody because it was like a stuntman that did it.
It was a different actor. It wasn't anyone who's actually in the movie. You're
like, oh, well, it could be Norris. It could be Palmer. It's one of them probably. No, it does have some rewatchability, but I'm sort of jealous of your fresh view.
It was, I mean, it really was excellent. Now, I have to say this is probably, I'm going to have to agree with you. This is his strongest film that I've seen. I also, full disclosure, am not a huge horror film. Like, I'll do this, something that's a little more thriller or suspense that has a little bit, like kind of like Alien, I'm good with, which I would consider also very horror, but like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Poltergeist, those kind of movies don't interest me. Never really got to me. I hated them growing up. They gave me nightmares. And so I've just kind of never really followed. Like, I got my cousin maybe watch It, like the original, like Tim Curry one, all those, screwed me over for a while. I don't enjoy the jump scares. I don't really enjoy being that frightened. And movies really did it to me growing up. And so just kind of steered clear. But this is that kind of, again, that suspense, that tension, that paranoia, which I do enjoy. Like, it kind of puts me on the edge of my seat and less of worried about, okay, is every second I'm going to be, wanting to.
There aren't many jump scares in this. There might be a handful, if you could even call them that. But you're right. It's a different kind of horror.
Which this is the kind of stuff that I do. Like, I think Alien is kind of the same way. Which I do, while I think this is great, I do, and I probably need to rewatch this a little bit, but I do like Alien better. And I know I'm only bringing that up just because I know this got compared to Alien a ton. I do think Ridley Scott's Alien is a more solid movie than this in a lot of ways.
I would agree.
But I'm not trying to knock this too much. Like, I really did thoroughly enjoy it. And I think this was excellent done. Like, there's a lot of thought. And also, obviously the ending is still talked about today, 40 years later, about, is Child's one, the thing or not. And so, and it's one of those things. I already have my theories of what I felt like when he was across from him, like watching the movie, but to be that kind of like that same, like, Nolan with the spinning top in Inception, like those kind of situations of like, we'll never know. And that's going to be our own personal decisions or arguments to have over drinks.
Yeah. And Carpenter's played coy for decades on that very front. Like he claims he knows who's in, he originally said one of them is infected and he knows who it is, but he's played coy, I always thought the good argument was that it was Childs, but just because he's off screen for so long, and then his willingness to take a swig from the bottle. But
for me, it was not the swig. I didn't actually even notice. Like I didn't remember that wasn't there. For me, it was Kurt Russell. Mac. His breath was just lots of fog and lots. But then Childs had none whatsoever.
Right, but the other argument is that Childs is closer to the fire, and so.
I don't.
But then they also, I've also read that like, hey, this thing can imitate perfectly, so you would have breath anyway.
Yeah. So.
And then I always found Norris's infection really fascinating because he still has a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he was assimilated more slowly. I don't know. It's really interesting. It's like why
or it doesn't. The thing doesn't know what's the good parts and the bad parts. So it's just kind of imitating your entire being. And so therefore it imitates your imperfections as well as what's running normally. Because again, this is probably, very few interactions with humanity. And then also does it work? Like, do each of these cells then, because obviously the blood itself, do they have like historical knowledge from the main, or is it like a hive mind system? Like, what is
there's
it?
All sorts of
Yeah.
There's all sorts of great like conjecture on memory. And now I will say on a rewatch, I do think Norris and Palmer are infected very early on because they both rush to put the fire out on the dogs in the kennel like way earlier than they should. And it doesn't make sense except in the context of that they're both the thing. And so that starts to kind of make some sense. But I just love, like on an initial viewing, how your mind convinces you that so many more people are the thing than really are, or at least according to the blood test that Mac comes up with. That was really fascinating. And then he has to shoot that guy dead because he wasn't
actually. Yeah.
No.
Even though I thought Clark was completely like, I was completely like, Clark's it. He's the first one gone. But going back, I just want to say, like, from again, we watched it last night, so I'm still kind of processing somewhat of the film, but I remember thinking, like, when they were burning the dogs, I was like, let it burn, guys, let it burn. Like, I know you're a little scared of the room or, stuff, but let it burn. Like, let this stuff, actually like kill the thing, because they did rush in. Like, I actually noticed that, but then didn't put two and two together. Of course, it's early on at that point. You only see it infecting the dog or the dogs, nothing else.
Yeah.
And so there's so many good moments that have just, again, the paranoia of allowing the viewer to be just as paranoid as the characters itself is masterful. Because I was, and one, I was 100% sure, Mac is not, because we're with him pretty much for most of the movie. And so I'm like, of course Mac's not, but there's definitely chances, and there were some good, good calls from the other characters of why Mac could be actually the thing.
Yeah. And you had, obviously the big one was that you had his jacket, like pretty, I wouldn't say early on, but definitely well before the final act. I've read things, people conjecture that Mac got infected during the big explosion at the end, that when it threw material all over the place, that he would have actually gotten infected, and that potentially he's the thing and Childs is human. But there was a sequel game or a concept that Carpenter had, and I'll have to go back and it was one of the two. My recollection's a little fuzzy on this, but either way, the premise was that both Childs and Mac were human,
Mm-hmm.
and they were rescued by a naval submarine. But I think the decision was made by the Navy to bring remnants on board. And then, because they wanted to, if this did well, it would have had a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that would have been the sequel, would have been The Thing on a sub, which is really a cool premise and much more in line with like Alien. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Like this is sort of nowhere to go, but they at least can get out of the complex and, run around. But yeah, I mean, I adore the ending of this movie. Mm-hmm. Like just the
up in the
it's
air.
It's a downer ending, but it's not, I don't know. I've watched movies with much darker endings than The Thing, but it's the music kicks in at the perfect moment. And it's just like, let's just rest here a while.
Yeah. Well, and especially definitely a downer ending because obviously if Childs is the Thing and Mac is not, Childs is the one with the flamethrower and Mac has no way to burn Childs. So, and if all the Thing needs is to fall back asleep in, the frozen tundra and make sure everyone else is dead and then get rescued and get brought back, then it's getting its win. And so it was kind of a downer ending because I'm sitting here going, well, the Thing has won. The Thing is going to infect Earth. And 27,000 hours later, it's going to be
3 years.
Yep.
I did the math. I watched it again. And I was like, what's the math on that? It's just a hair over 3 years that the computer said the entire world would be infected or basically assimilated. So
by the way, it was my impression there would be no math.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Sorry, I had to do the Chevy Chase. And possibly, I think I said it wrong, but that's beside the point.
Sorry.
But it's interesting about a sequel, especially since it did terrible. It did absolutely terrible.
I feel terrible for Carpenter because this was like his first studio picture. Mm-hmm.
And apparently go ahead, finish.
They gave him like a big budget and I mean, all the tools at his disposal, and I just think it was made ahead of its time. Probably by 5 to 10 years. And although with the success of Alien, it makes sense why they greenlit it. Because this was Aliens, 79?
79. Yeah. So only 3 years before. And I mean, this was 15 million budget and Alien was 11. So you're not talking that much more to film this to try to replicate it.
No.
Or replicate its success. But I mean, it did like $20 million box office worldwide. That's just oof. I mean, technically speaking, you are 33% above your budget, but that's not a lot at all.
No, and I don't think, home video sales didn't save this. It grew cult status. I mean, that's kind of Carpenter's modus operandi is these things kind of ferment in certain circles of film lovers and they achieve cult status. Now that wasn't true of Halloween. Halloween was a success by any stretch of the imagination as soon as it came out. Mm-hmm. But his next big group of films, like
Escape from LA, Big Trouble in
cult.
China,
they're kind of cult classics. And that's just, but I guess I'd heard that the failure of this really affected him negatively. And a lot of it had to do with E.T. It came out the same year as E.T. And this is, we'll remind folks, this is when films sat in theaters for a year. Mm-hmm. And if E.T.'s in the theater, and it's a small theater, you're probably not running alongside it. So,
and apparently this is Carpenter's favorite film that he's ever done. Like he went on, talked about it too. So it said it kind of hit him hard because he thought this was like his masterpiece, and he's just like this. I love this film,
and it is. I'm saying, and I'm not even close to the first person to say that. Absolutely, I think it's a horror masterpiece from what most people consider a master of the genre. So.
It's a masterpiece in everything except for Kurt Russell's hat. I hate that. That thing was terrible.
He looks like Yosemite Sam. Yeah, like he hops in the helicopter with that. I'm like, okay, I get that he's a cowboy. You didn't have to be that literal.
Well, I think obviously, I think it has it sideways so it doesn't go over his head, so he can see everything around him. But I'm
super
like,
funny.
Oh, it looks dumb. Oh, it's like this. Like, how did that happen? So,
by the way, you talk about foreshadowing in a movie. The whole thing of how this is going to play out is foreshadowed when they go to the Norwegian camp. Mm-hmm. Like all of it, burn down. The remnants of the thing,
people dead,
everybody's dead. Like you get exactly that. Mm-hmm. By the way,
and you have two people still alive at the end.
Yes,
going after right, because they're flying in the helicopter.
Yeah,
and one's shooting.
And now, maybe that's the hint, right? Because both people flying the helicopter were not infected. Mm-hmm. So if by that logic, then McCready and Childs were both human. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I love that there's a debate. And as far as I'm concerned, Carpenter should take that to his grave. Like it offers, I don't want to know.
Yeah. This is one of those conversations that need to happen. So, but a couple things. So both about the Norwegians, but apparently if you actually speak Norwegian, when the guy yells at the American scientist, that gives away or at least not the entire plot, but gives away what's going to happen. Cause he's just basically like, the dog is the thing. It's not a dog. Get away from it, you idiots. So
this didn't play well in Norway?
No, apparently not.
Everybody just leaves.
Yeah. Just like, okay, well, I know what's going on. And then pieces out. The second thing. So this is, you'll obviously get this, but this is kind of a fun thing for those people who are not maybe in the movie business. So the burnt out Norwegian base is actually the US base just after they blew it up. So they filmed it after the final scene.
That's brilliant.
Of it, because they're like, why build a base just to burn down when we're going to burn down this one that we've built? We'll just use it again. And obviously like it's burned down at nighttime, and then you see the Norwegian base in daytime. And so like, it's hard to tell.
And you only film part of it.
Yeah.
They make it look smaller. Like they only film a wing of it. That's brilliant. Brilliant.
Absolutely. Just save some money. This is typical stuff all the time where you just reuse different sets or other things and you just change camera angles, change a couple different things, and you never know.
By the way, I love that sequence where they're just TNTing the place. Like it's just badass. Like it's just tough. Like the way the music is, and the lighting scheme when they go down into the generator where the generator is, the lighting down there by Kundi is outstanding, like outstanding. And I was just watching it because it had been a little bit since I'd watched it in its entirety. And I was just like, wow, that is lighting. That is movie lighting if I've ever seen it. And the whole movie is lit really well, but the end in the generator room underneath, just the way he just creates these little puddles of like golden light and shadow. And it's really high level cinematography.
Yeah, because it's almost like kind of that same little like descent into hell kind of situation of like, this is where the thing really is. This is like the blood of the laboratory lives, kind of thing. So it was done really, really well. Though I do have to say my favorite scene was the blood test scene. That whole sequence, just super tense the entire time. I'm like, how he kept it going for that long and still made it super interesting and didn't wear me out was impressive, because that's not a short scene. And the entire time I'm just like, what's going on? What's going to happen? And then of course the thing happens and they get rid of it. And then of course we have to go back and test the rest of them. And now it's, Windows is dead. And so it's now just Mac who's having to start this process over again. Oh my goodness. It's done so well. Done so well.
I felt so bad for those guys that are tied to like Palmer. And it's like, and then that's not Palmer.
That's not Palmer. Well, and so I was watching something on YouTube that was talking about it. And it's like one of the telltale signs is all the characters who are human are like really looking at the blood and like like freaking out, like what's going on. But Palmer is just looking down and kind of smirks or whatever at the end. And he turns out because he's like, he knows how it's going to go. He knows he's the thing. So yeah, man, like just these small tidbits that I'm sure like on rewatches, you start to pick up and you start to realize and like, oh my goodness, the hints were here all along. I just didn't notice it.
So the rewatch game becomes an attempt to figure out the timings on infection and different things. That's really like the other thing is sometimes I can't figure out like when does Blair like become infected? Because I'm pretty confident when they take him to the shack and put him in there, he's not infected. But at some point he does. And then I want to know, like, was he building that craft as the Thing? Or was he building that craft down there as Blair? I always took it that he was the Thing because it looked like it looked like a freaking UFO. You know, it looked like a saucer.
Well, it looked like the thing that crash landed in the beginning of the film. So I mean, again, one watch going through, but I always thought like it was at some point after when Blair was like, let me come back in or whatnot.
By then, I think he is. Yeah,
he is. But there's a point where there's a noose hanging there. And I almost feel like at some point, like he built that because he didn't want to get, taken over by the Thing. And so he's going to rather kill himself as opposed to that. Obviously that didn't happen, but there was at some point, somehow it got in there. And I don't know how, like who, what, where, when, how. Again, didn't track everything completely, but.
And Max seems to know because he's like, this guy's not even acting like Blair. Like, I'm fine. I won't hurt anybody. I'm good. Yeah. I'm like,
no. Well, especially because he went like, I understand why he went mad, quote unquote, because he's just like, if this thing gets out, the entire world's done. They're like, there's no way to contain it. There's no way to fight against it. Like in the short amount of time, it would then take over everything, So he was, again, like you said, he was the brilliant one who was just like, this thing needs to be frozen. If it's caught by us, it needs to kill us all and then refreeze until someone comes and finds us, brings us all home, and it can wake back up and kind of take someone else over and then slowly take over the world. But then at what cost? Like what happens then? Like that's the interesting thing. So this kind of does remind me a little bit of it's a different movie. It's kind of like a Alien ripoff, but it also kind of feels more like this in a lot of regards. It was a movie called Life. It had like Ryan Reynolds in it and a bunch of other actors into it. But it came out like right after like Arrival, but before Passengers. It was kind of like that typical like, hey, one of the studios is doing a space film. Let's all do space films and try to like match up and get all the money. And I thought this one Life was going to be great. It was actually, in my opinion, like, but it has a lot of these same characteristics of this creature that just kind of continues to grow and is a danger to society and has an ending that
I'll tell you a spiritual cousin to this film that I find even more depressing than this one. The ambiguous ending of The Thing is hopeful compared to the end of Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Donald Sutherland.
Yes.
And that movie I find even more terrifying in some ways than this. That ending is just mortifying because that woman thinks that he's survived and she runs up to him and he's been assimilated. Very similar, like kind of a similar premise too. It's just like a slower method of copying, but it's effectively the same thing, except it's done, and that's not even the original of that. The 70s one was a remake, I believe. And there was another remake with Daniel Craig in the 2000s or 2010s or something like that. I never saw that one, but yeah, that movie is bleak. Just like this looks not nearly as bleak just because the ending is ambiguous.
Yeah. They could both be human. They could
both be the thing and they don't know that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a fun premise too. So do you have anything else?
If you've never seen it, or if you saw another movie you thought it was The Thing and it didn't have Kurt Russell in it, or Brimley in it. Go see this instead. The only thing was it was really fun to see Keith David in this, and I really enjoy him. I mean, as Childs, I also like him in other things, kind of, it also felt a little bit like his precursor to Pitch Black with Vin Diesel, it was kind of like, he keeps having to deal with aliens. I just want to kill him, man. This guy just can't win at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. But go see this. This is, like Ben said, it does take a little bit, about 45 minutes. It's only like an hour and 45-minute film.
Yeah, so, it's not long, but it
does feel long in the beginning, but it is one of those where I think it's building the tension, building the characters, building the life, so you can kind of watch it all quickly devolve. And excellent. I was really impressed after I turned this off. I just did not think I was going to like it nearly as much as I did. So this is I'm very happy with this.
I think that's great. And this is like one of the few themed releases we've done with around Halloween. So
perfect.
We don't do that. We just don't do that a whole lot, but I thought, hey, why not? And pleasantly surprised that you came in fresh to this one. So
and really fresh too. I'm like really happy that I knew nothing about this film going into it. So
this is definitely one you don't want to know the details. So
it was like I saw The Sixth Sense like 2 years after it came out and didn't know anything about it. Like somehow avoided all the spoilers and all the hype about it, and then sat down and watched it by myself one day and was just like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
So this is kind of feel like how I felt, So.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up our conversation on John Carpenter's The Thing. Definitely a masterpiece, I think, of horror.
Yeah.
Sits up on the pantheon of horror and sci-fi horror. So we appreciate everybody joining us this week for another cinema conversation here on Cinema A to B. And we will be back next week with a start of something special. So that we'll probably post it anyway, but it's going to be our mini season of Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And 5 episodes that we've kind of come up with to discuss. And so we're looking forward to that. So we will release that next, and see you all on Monday.
Thanks, everybody.